Good evening, everybody out there, and thank you for joining me again. It's been a couple weeks since I've been able to get on here. Had some personal life stuff, some work stuff, so I do apologize for the jumping of the weeks here. Tuesday was supposed to be a lot more calm, but apparently it is not. So it's just as wild and just as ridiculous as Sundays for me. But it is a little later in the evening, so it gives me the opportunity to kind of get in here and get some work done and really change up some of the things that I wanted to do on the show. So tonight's episode, obviously, if you've read the title, we're going to be diving a little bit into the afterlife, the concept of afterlife, the different cultural perspectives on the afterlife, and really just kind of starting the conversation here just on what we think is after the end, right? So, we all as people, I think, inherently have experienced different things, and we all have a different journey, and we all have different perspectives. And being raised very Irish, death was something that wasn't necessarily mourned. It was just an inevitability. And so, what is after this, right? And so there's a lot of different religious perspectives, there's cultural perspectives, there's personal perspectives, and I just want to dive into a few of them. Nothing I say tonight is intended to be factual, right? These are all just different perspectives in a discussion. I have my personal beliefs, you have your personal beliefs, but predominantly being in the US, I'm going to start the discussion around some of the different things that Christianity has added to the conversation, right? For those of you, hey, Andrew, hey, Damien, thank you guys for joining. For those of you who have had experience with Southern Christians, Northern Christians, things like that, there's very different regional perspectives. And some, of course, excuse me, are a lot more passionate about what they believe. Steve, Wojo, how we doing? Good to see you out there. And so the first real deep dive I want to get into, good evening, Russ. Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining. The first thing I really want to get into is the Christian perspective on the afterlife, right? That's the predominant religion here in the U.S. And that's where a lot of us in the paranormal field get the majority of our backlash and opposition and things like that. We have multiple events over at Harstuff Hall in Rockland, up here in Massachusetts with Warner Preservation, the Warner Paranormal Preservation Society, where we get a lot of engagement from Christians and things like that. And it's not positive usually. There's a lot of things where they're pulling from the Old Testament, whether it be Leviticus or Deuteronomy, where they bring up, you are not supposed to deal with mediums, spiritualists, spiritists, and things like that. So, they say they are of, contrary to God. They're a look into the afterlife that we're not supposed to have, almost similar to the Christian parables and stories of Adam and Eve in the garden, where there is forbidden knowledge that exists, right? Yeah, it's all positive. It brings more attention. Yeah, I guess. But being somebody that's studied in Christianity, it really bothers the hell out of me when the religious and not spiritual, not faithful people try to weaponize a book. But just to go into it a little bit, again, it's Deuteronomy and Leviticus, in which it explicitly says that you're not supposed to deal with mediums, and in fact, technically, you're supposed to take them out into a field, bury them up to their head, and throw rocks at them until they're dead, or put them up against a wall and do so, which I've met a few that maybe, Russ, maybe you could throw a rock at him here and there, but I wouldn't want to finish the job. But, yeah, we did. Russ talking about full Westboro Baptist. And I was going to go full Kevin Smith on them. I was going to get out there with them. I was going to talk to them and have a conversation, and maybe if I can win some hearts and minds. But I guess the big thing here is in Christianity, although there is this mention that you're not supposed to deal with these types of folks, there's multiple mentions of specters, spirits, and ghosts. Um, and none of them are perceived as a negative thing when they're brought up. Now, there is two instances where they are negative, where supposedly they were agents of Satan that were coming to influence things. But I want to dial it way back, right? We can go to Job 4. You go into the Christian Bible and you take a look at Job chapter 4. They talk about spirits passing. Job's friend discusses a spirit passing by his face before the great tests and during the tests, and they use the term spirit, and that's in the King James. In the more New International, they use the term ghost. And so, hey, honey, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Yeah, Russ, that's Holy Spirit, Holy Ghost. Those are a little bit more along the lines of like an avatar or a faction of the Trinity, not so much an individual, a soul that has failed to move over to either the tabernacle or the gates of heaven, which I think is also kind of funny that most Christians don't realize that no one's in heaven yet. Everyone, according to the Christian Bible, everybody's kind of waiting for the second coming of Christ when he can open the gates to heaven. Everyone's been approved, but only 2 people entered the gates of heaven so far. So that's him and the thief. But anyway, back to it. You also have 1 Samuel chapter 28, where Saul, shitter's full, yeah, where Saul is actually sitting down with a medium against the orders of Leviticus and Deuteronomy to contact the recently deceased Samuel, which he does. And so he has communication with the ghost of Samuel, explaining why God had taken him off of the earth and why it was his time to die. And so here's another example of someone in the Bible having an interaction with a specter or a ghost, it actually being the individual, it not being some other malicious or malignant spirit, and communicating, right? Where would Knights Templar sit? About 500 or so years ago. It depends. Knights Templar, there's way more politics involved in the Knights Templar than I think a lot of the occult that they've been accredited to. There are definitely organizations. That's a completely different episode. We'll do a Knights Templar episode later, I promise. Yeah, we actually had the Jehovah's come by the house earlier and left a pamphlet, which I think is hilarious because we have 2 12-foot or 13-foot skeletons out front. We got a big ghost, inflatable. We have a 6-foot skeleton crawling out of the ground. I don't know why they came to our door, but I lost track. You guys are killing me here. Hey, Stacy, good to see you out there, man. But you have this interaction between a layperson, no, not a layperson, he was technically clergy, right? Reaching out to his mentor and looking for guidance in the afterlife, and he received it. Yeah, because the heathens need saving. I think I'm a work order a bit too steep for them. So against the mandate of the Bible, you have a pretty profound leader in the Christian church going to get guidance from his predecessor, from his mentor, through a medium, through a spiritualist, or spiritist is how the Bible actually refers to it. And so it's just kind of this interesting dichotomy where you have a major prominent figure that is consulting ghosts, but the entire book says it's not. So that is all to say that in the Christian Bible, the concept of ghosts, the concept of an earthly afterlife is very, very prominent. Now, there are other passages that say that once you move on to the next phase, you can't come back here. So there's some wiggle room to say that there's a space in between, because it's very contradictory if you take it at face value. So once you leave and enter the heavens, there is no returning to earth. There is no way back. That's actually explicitly mentioned in Leviticus and oh shoot, I can't remember now. Chronicles, maybe. I can't remember the book that's in. However, there are also statements about people communing with individuals here on Earth still. So there has to be some kind of in between, right? There has to be some kind of return policy where you can come back and have a conversation. So that's very interesting to me, because that heavily implies that Christianity and its predecessor, Judaism, and its cousin, Islam, all recognize that there is the potential for spirits communicating with people today, right? And I think that that's kind of just a really important foundation when we have this conversation. Yeah, all sales final, no givebacks. Now moving on, because let's not keep this, Eurocentric or Christian centric or Middle Eastern centric, really, because that's where it all started. Yeah, Lazarus. He was more of a return to sender, because his spirit didn't come back. He full on body came back. There are two zombies in the Bible. One's Jesus, one's Lazarus. If we flip, hey Denise, thank you for hopping on. Where's my Kool-Aid? So if we flip the globe and give it a spin and head over to the Asiatic continent, right? I could have done an entire episode on Japanese, Chinese, Taiwanese, and Korean perspectives, and some of the Shinto religions and things like that have emerged from there, and their approach to spirits and things like that. Oh, the Secret Bible of John is a good read. And so is Chinese Dynasty. Both actually, yes, very good. I would also suggest, if you're really interested in some kind of niche Christian perspectives, take a look at the Ethiopian Christian Bible. It actually has a very controversial chapter in it. It is the Book of Judas. They have a perspective that, back when I was kind of establishing my perspectives on Christianity and my own faith, they had some things that I was kind of toying with and thinking with back then, except they've managed to contextualize it over the past 1,000 years. So definitely check out the Ethiopian Bible. Very, very cool. Very different perspective on some of the events of Jesus's life and the process of him becoming Christ. Actualizing Christ. He was born Christ. I get that. Please don't come after me on that. All right, but to flip it around, I'm actually going to land more Central Asia and go with Hindi. So Hindi, I think, has some of the more interesting concepts and parallels to a lot of other faiths across the world. The jinn is definitely an interesting thing. The Middle Eastern concept of jinn, however, that's more of akin to an elemental, or kind of a distant relative to like a cryptid. Oh yeah. Yep, this one I definitely wasn't going to have a guest on, mostly because there's a lot of dense information, and really I'm not going to dive into kind of a back and forth with this until I get through some of it, right? Yes, they are the Shebians. And yes, there is a lot of evidence currently aiming towards that the Ark of the Covenant is in Ethiopian care. But back to Hinduism. So Hinduism, one of the oldest religions in the world. So Hindi, if I'm not mistaken, predates Christianity by about 1,500 years via text. Now, the actual practice and things like that, I do believe, go much further back. However, they have the Bahat and the Bahat Ganan. And there are two kind of sections of spirits and ghosts. So you have the Bahat Ganan, which are individuals that were unable to achieve a certain level of spiritual enlightenment through their existence here and have become stunted and now will essentially exist as an apparition until they kind of hit that stride where they can move on to the next incarnation. Now, the others, the Bahats, not the Bahats Ganon, but just Bahat, are often considered malignant and evil spirits, mainly because they are the ones that had a violent death. Their funeral rites were revoked. They did not have the proper exit to this life, right? So whether that's via the ceremony, the ritual, not unlike last rites in Catechism and some other Western side of the Middle East and European countries. And also, I find it terribly interesting that this concept of the death rites is something that's stretched even through Druidic and Celtic and Gaelic down through Europe, all the way through into India. Now, the concept of the death rite causing issue for the person in the afterlife does kind of end at that India line, that East Asian line, where the ceremonies performed upon your death can have a significant impact on your afterlife. And so that kind of parallel drew me more to have a little bit more research into the Greek mythology and the Greek histories and the Greek practices around this, because at one point you figure the Greek between the Greeks and the Romans, you had such a massive swath of influence covering Asia, the North African coasts, and a little bit further down in towards following the Nile down through Egypt, and then you also had them stretching out all the way to Spain and Gaul. Which, if you don't know what Gaul is, pick up a history book. But what I thought was cool is in the Greek cultures, you had 3 different categories, 9 different types. So you had the atapoi, the orioi, I tried pronouncing this earlier, the aori, and the bathon tau. Now, the atapoi are the spirits of people who weren't buried properly. So they weren't given the correct burial rites. They weren't given the coins to cross the river Styx, things like that. So essentially, Hades couldn't do anything with them. So they're kind of fucked, right? They're just stuck in this limbo forever. Anubis, the herald of the dead, the weigher of scales. If your soul weighs more than, or if your heart weighs more than a feather, then you're condemned. And that's actually a beautiful analogy, a beautiful visual metaphor that I would love to go into a little bit further, but I'm going to stay on task. I'm going to do everything I can. And so those essentially, the Oedipuses are, if you've ever read the Odyssey, the Iliad, or Ulysses, there is an entire swath of that book where Odysseus is confronted by the ghosts of the lingering spirits of folks that are unable to actually pass on. They're stuck on the shores, and they bounce back to reality every now and again. So they're unable to cross over. And then you have the Aori, and that, to me, I find particularly interesting. The Greek had an entire category of spirits and ghosts. The feather in hieroglyph means truth, and so there's so much underlying, and I'll put this up there, Stacey. There's so much beautiful Egyptian mythology and story and mythos are so beautifully done. Everything about it has I love it. But anyway, back to it. The Aori, those are spirits that died too young. Now, what I find particularly interesting about this is they don't necessarily say that they died young. So that does not mean that, it's a child or it's a teenager or anything like that. it actually means that it was before their time. So they died out of order. And so, if you're familiar with Greek mythology at all, you have the three fates, which kind of determine the trajectory of everyone. If you've ever seen the Hercules movie, they're the three witchy looking ladies who cut the strings of life for to end people's run here on Earth. It's far more complicated than that in the actual mythology, and it's far more complicated than that in their religion and in their stories. But if you were to pass outside of your normal planned trajectory, your normal fate, you would fall into this category. And then you are stuck here until the time you were supposed to go. So, Damien, I'll have to check that out. The Australian Aboriginal. I haven't had a chance to look into that at all. Didn't even think to cross my radar. That's so far beyond the equator. It wasn't even on my to-do list. I didn't even think of it, but I will check it out and do a little bit more research just for my own education. But you're stuck here because you left early, right? And so this is very kind of apropos for me. I'm in the middle of a career change, and my line of management just is kind of joking that I'm a ghost at work. I have 4 days left, 5 work days left, but I don't have any of the abilities to use the systems. I don't have access to the different back office support things. So there's really nothing I can do except for every now and again drop a hint or help somebody get through something or things like that. And so there was actually a joke made at the end of last week that I'm just a ghost here. And so I'm still here until my designated date that I'm supposed to leave, but my ability to interact and make a meaningful impact in the world around me at work is gone. So now it's just subtle influence and conversations. And so that's where they kind of fall in, right? And then you have the really long one, the biothanatoi. And those are folks that died violently, whether in battle, at home, or anything like that. And those, again, are also considered the most common to be malicious or malignant spirits that really kind of stick to areas or zones. Now, the reason why I went this deep into the Greek, because I'm going to rewind back to the Hindi, and then there's a lot of connectivity there. Because in the Hindi, you have the Bahats and the Bahatsganan have a typical type of haunt, right? And so it's either forests, deserts, nature zones, different nodes within energy patterns and things like that. But also, this is one of the things that I think is super cool because the Greeks had this as well. Ghosts are most common to haunt crossroads, thresholds, and theoretical boundaries. And so whether it's a town line, a crossroad, a home's front door, those were all common places to have Bahat Ganan. And so the Hindi believed, again, that these points of intersection, these points of crossing, these theoretical thresholds were very active points for ghosts to be at, for spirits to be at. The Greeks in the same. The idea of these crossroad spirits at crossroads, again, that very much a Greek thing. And then you move on to Christianity and the idea of crossroad demons and these ideas that you can find the devil at a crossroad. And so this kind of imagery and this idea of ghosts' existence and ghosts being very prevalent in human mythos, human legends, and really just the story of humanity. We've always had these ghosts along us. Now, there are two other far more ancient, far more historied cultures that I did dive a little bit into. One of which very close to myself. One of which is now close to where I live. And so you have the Native Americans and the Druids, which are the nature folk of Northern Europe and North America. Now, what I thought was pretty funny, not funny, but interesting, when diving into it, the only real way, so diving into what the Native Americans believe in the afterlife and things like that. It's very difficult because, as you know, westernized education systems don't really give us the breakdown that there is such a huge diverse voice and belief in Native Americans that tribe by tribe, you're going to get, sometimes similar, sometimes wildly different perspectives on similar things. So I kind of just dived into the Lakota tribe only because it seemed like that they publish a lot of their beliefs, and they've really done a great job at giving easy access to those lay people that don't really know anything to their belief structures and their history. So one of the things that I found most peculiar and most interesting is the Lakota tribe actually have a thing called the ghost dance. And this is actually a practice to call those spirits in. And so there's definitely this reliance on this, on the ghosts and the ancestors and things like that. And a very strong belief in their existence and their ability to interact and interplay with us. So what I think is pretty cool is like the American horror movie version of ghosts, I think most commonly align to the Native American perspectives on it, where spirits can appear as like shadowy figures, translucent, sometimes coming up a little bit more. And again, it goes back into, where are they going to be? It goes back into the same kind of things as the Hindi, the Greek, the Christians, where, there are certain nature spots. There are spots of tragedy. There are spots of high energy. Now, with the Lakota tribe and other Native American tribes, you're not going to have this very, very Western perspective of boundaries, where there are territories, where there are lines, where there are carved out zones, right? Everything was a little bit more amalgamous, even between tribes, neighboring tribes. There was a lot of kind of give and take on those edges, and it wasn't necessarily a hard line. So the idea that they don't have that concept of the boundary, totally understand. However, there are very much conversations about ley lines and the ability of spirits to be able to be more active on those ley lines and those crossroads of energy throughout nature and throughout North America, which I thought was very, very interesting. Now, the Native Americans also, and again, when I say Native Americans, I'm going to be more specific. It's the Lakota tribe that I did the primary research on, also have death rites, where there are very specific things that you have to do for someone when they passed, whether it was in battle, whether it was violent, whether it was peaceful, whether it was old age or what have you. But I think the major difference, what I think is really cool about the Lakota tribe, is there is no punishment for failing to do so. These things only ease the transition into the next existence. They make things smoother, they make it go simpler, and they make it better for the individual as they pass on to the next iteration. So I find it interesting that those aren't, there are no, like, you come back as a ghost or you're stuck in limbo because somebody didn't do something for you. Also, to kind of rewind back to the Greeks real quick, if no one's had a chance to see Chaos yet on, I think it's on Netflix or Peacock, very, very cool show and very interesting take on Greek mythology in a more modern setting. But it very much goes into the necessity of death rites and coins in Greek culture and things like that, and the crossing the river Styx. Now, to go into Druidic, which is going to be more of the Gaelic Northern European perspectives on this, I think it's really important to note that most of the information you're going to find on Gaelic and Druidic practices, beliefs, and things like that are heavily cultivated. And actually, the realization of a few authors about 100 years ago, most of the Druids in Northern Europe, and especially Gaelic Druids, whether in Scotland or Ireland, were all but exterminated. Even discussing the religion was punishable by death. There was a lot of hostility and very, very difficult to know how much of the culture actually survived and how much of it is just assumptions and how much of it is confirmed fact. Because truthfully, the English came through, and when Christianity came through, especially, everyone's heard the old St. Peter drove the snakes from Ireland. The snakes weren't snakes; they were druids. They were Gaelic and Celtics, Gaelics and Celts, that had a very nature based religion. That's where we get leprechauns, sprites, sprigs, fairy folk, things like that. A lot of that called your lucky charms are thanks to Gaelic Gaelic myths, right? But not unlike the Native Americans, the Druids also believed that ancestors were a source of guidance, power, belief, and direction. And so there was, and again, this is tough because a lot of the information is hearsay, and a lot of it is academics that claimed to have found things 100, 200 years ago. When the stringencies kind of let off, and you were able to talk a little bit more about Irish and Scottish culture without significant English reprisal. The concept of the other world. Now, if you go back, there's a few different other worlds in Gaelic culture. You have Tirignog, you have Avalon for the hyper anglicized version of it. And you have the more modern terminology of the other world. Now, other worlds, the other world, unlike Tirignog, which is reserved for, like, it's essentially like the Valhalla of Ireland and Scotland, and once upon a time England as well. But okay, Twilight of the Gods, have to check that out. The other world is accessible by us now. So we have the ability to meditate, to pray upon, and to reach out to this other world to talk to our ancestors and draw ancestors to us in the material plane to give us guidance and assistance. And what I think is actually really interesting, if accurate, is guidance towards resources. Yeah, Valhalla. So the Gaelic had Tirignog. I can't speak too much on Valhalla. I do know a little bit about Norse mythology and Nordic religions, but not enough to really get into it too much. All I know is that even though Valhalla sounds pretty badass, it kind of sounds a little bit shit because you're just cannon fodder in Ragnarok. Tirignog, on the other hand, is the land of milk and honey for the warriors and the brave. And so one of the things too with Druids is they believed that the spirit could move on, right? And not move on to another existence, not move on to like a heaven, not move on to a another life, but instead stay here and change into the sea, which are like spirits of the sea and like wood sprites and things like that. You could, if you were here long enough, if someone had drawn you back to this plane, to this existence. Loki appears across all religions. Yeah, but I mean, we're not talking too much about that. I will say this: if you want a really interesting take on Loki, there's actually a gentleman on YouTube, TikTok, and Twitch that explicitly goes through his theory that Christianity and the entire Judeo-Christian Bible is a manifestation of Loki post Ragnarok. Like we're already in the midst of, like we are in the back half of Ragnarok currently. All right. You absolutely are. But before you get to feast and drink, oh yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you have a hell of a ride right up until your immortality is abruptly ended, and I think you get nothing, right? Like you just get non-existence when the warriors of Valhalla pass. They pass into the nothing. They go back into oh no, they go back into the life tree. They become they go back into what the hell is Odin's Oh crap, I can't remember it. Anyway, yeah, thank you. Thank you for stop distracting me. I'm always distracting myself. But Damien, check him out. Do Loki back to Yggdrasil. Yes. But there's a word for it. Because it's not just straight Yggdrasil. It's the energy that Yggdrasil like feeds on. It's like the thing that gives Yggdrasil life. And I can't remember the damn word now. But yeah, Damien, check out Loki Christianity Theory, Ragnarok. It's super cool. It's very interesting. I think it's super interesting. But one of the things in researching the Druidic and Gaelic stories and just some of the different tales, one of the big things that I actually found was the Well of Segis. And this is actually a story that is very similar to Hercules in that, well, it's not even Hercules, it's Pericles. Now the Hercules movie's screwing me up here. Was it Pericles? Because I know Odysseus did. Anyway, about a character that goes into the other world, the undying world, to bring someone back. And so the idea that there is a physical entrance for a living person to enter the afterlife to reclaim someone to bring them back into our world, I find just terribly interesting. However, that is another example that we have kind of cruising through all of these different major areas, these different continents, of not only there being ghosts, but there being a place that the ghosts can go, and that we as individuals here can reach out and communicate, but also go to another physical location with our bodies to reclaim someone and pull them back. So what is this? The Well of Erd. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Sierra. The Waters of Erd. Yes. Yes. Damien, I'm not sure I understand this. All gates of hell are or have a guardian of the gate. I'm not entirely sure the context there that would play into this, but I mean, Cerberus, right? I think Christianity is just about the only Judeo-Christianity and Islam are the only ones that don't have like hell guardians. And also, if you go back to Greek and Hindi, there's no heaven or hell. There is just an afterlife. And based on how you were, or what you're moving towards, that's how your afterlife is going to go. And then Egyptian, of course, you can either go into the nothing or you can go into the land of milk and honey. Again, I'm not going to dive too far into the Egyptian stuff because I don't have it prepared tonight. But Damien, you asked a while ago, and I didn't ignore it. But you asked, what's my belief? And so jumping in that now. I personally believe we are some kind of energy, some kind of wavelength exists. And again, we are an energy that exists on like 6 or 7 dimensions, right? So we are that energy kind of trapped in our mind, which is a 3-dimensional object, piloting a meat suit through, like it really is. We're like a 6-dimensional being or 5-dimensional being, kind of cohabitating a 4-dimensional space and piloting a 3-dimensional machine, right? And so I don't think that yes, yeah, and the stories of Gilgamesh, the 7 Veils, but also one of the major contributors to the modern day Christian perspective on hell, and it's a fiction, is Dante's Inferno, the 7 layers of hell, the burning fire, the lake of fire, things like that. But also, if you look in Revelations, the lake of fire is actually here on Earth. That's where the lake of fire will happen. Hell, according to everything outside of Revelations, is the existence and the absence of God. Um, it is not anything like that. But again, back to my answer. Yeah, I think that we're just an energy or a wavelength, right? And I think that there's times where we will imprint on the space around us, that it will imprint on the people around us. They've done scientific studies as people pass, wearing synaptic rigs to actually study their brainwaves at the moment of death. There is a spike of brain activity immediately preceding death. Preceding death. Uh, preceding, preceding. Yeah, coming before death. And there's all these takes that like your life flashes before your eyes and your brain goes into hyperactivity in the moment of death. Um, to me, I don't know, that very much could mean to me that you're exiting, right? Like your brain waves spike because it's time for it to launch. You look at a rocket, right? The fuel ignites and there's a huge explosion underneath the rocket before it leaves the platform. And I think that there are echoes, right? I think the idea of the spirit echoing and staying on earth is such a universal human experience and a universal human belief that I think it would be like really arrogant to contradict it. I think it would be an act of profound arrogance to think that there's not some credit to it. Um, what is this? With a dream reader machine can be used on the passing of someone and recreate an old classic horror. Oh, but yeah, I think spirits exist. I think that there are echoes. Um, oh, that's actually so, Stacey. That's to me. That's actually like I don't know. What would be the point of reviewing your life at death? I mean, outside of the fact that almost every religion says that there's some form of judgment on how you lived your life immediately following the other side. I mean, there are very few religions that don't have some consequence to the way that you existed here. Um, Whether it's Buddhist, Hindi, Shinto, Vajna, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, uh, Greek, even Norse, Gaelic, Native American, every single faith across the world, more or less, outside of a very, very small few, have a form of judgment at the end. And now you've asked religious, yes, but scientific. So let's say for just a moment um, that humanity might be five. No, Stacy, no, that's actually blatantly false. No, see, this is a bullshit statement, and I'm not going to let it stand. Science does not say there is nothing after death. Science says there is no evidence of something after death. And one of the major statements that people get really twisted here is the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. Science proves that there is an absence of evidence, not that there is evidence of an absence. This is a bullshit argument, and it's a straw man argument for pseudo intellectuals to make. It really does piss me off. If you couldn't tell, no, that's it's a nonsense take, because there are folks like you look at, like I think one of the major proponents of this whole science proves there's nothing afterwards um is like Ricky Gervais, right? Oh, you baited me into getting pissed off over this. No, so science does not say that there is nothing after life. Science says that there's no evidence that we can definitively point to what's after life. However, if you want to go through collective assumption and rational deductive reasoning, if every major culture and every major group of people and every major civilization that we have documentation of since the written word has some kind of end of life judgment, I would say scientifically, using the scientific method with deductive reasoning, that it would be fair to assume that it's not necessarily the body doing it, but it's the spirit and the soul going through that motion of what happened in my life and how did I live it. Um, Also, I think that in moments of trauma, that heightened brain spike activity, I do believe that we are putting ourselves out there a little bit more, and we can very easily imprint ourselves on the things, people, and places around us at the time of our death. Because again, that's another major thing that almost every culture has, that believes that there's something after this, is, places of death are haunted or can be haunted. That's been a pretty universal belief and universal approach to different things, um, especially over the past few hundred years. Um, but in written faiths, that's been a thing for a few thousand years. Not to keep jumping onto the culture that I wasn't going to talk about, but you look at the Egyptians, you have the city of the dead, where supposedly spirits were so abundant that you could just commune on a regular basis with it. Um, but yeah, like an energy surge, Sarah, exactly like that. You have a heightened spike in your brain and you just pump out an imprint of who you are and what you are across. Yeah, I don't know that mythology outside of Supernatural, the television show, because Christian perspectives on what angels look like is bullshit. Like, if you actually read the Torah and you go back to the descriptions of what angels actually look like, they are fucking terrifying. This idea of the beautified cherub-like angel is an adoption of Greek imagery from Cupid and there are others. I can't remember what they're called right now. But those are adoptions of other cultures' perspectives on what angelic beings would look like. The Judeo-Christian perspective on what an angel looks like is incredibly vast, massive, multi-headed beasts that are just abominations, according to our sensibilities, that are like the size of planets, that are just horrific things. And the only time that Ark of the Covenant was radioactive. I mean, that's, again, I don't know. We don't know. We're so many assumptions are like falsely verified through Hollywood indoctrination, right? Like the idea that the Ark of the Covenant is this like radioactive bomb, or that it's like some kind of super highly radioactive isotope that's trapped in a box. We don't know that it's a lead line box. We don't know what it actually is because we haven't been able to study it. We haven't been able to see it. But no, I think that there's so many misconceptions, especially when it comes to Christianity, because of so many different iterations, because of so many isolated beliefs, and because so many people claim to be Christian having never read the book. There's so much confusion around what is and what isn't according to that faith. So it's very tough. But that's where the nuclear site in Africa is before nuclear was created. Well, I mean, the idea of radioactive isotopes traveling here via meteorite would be also very, very possible. But again, it's a matter of I don't know. That's a topic for a different day, though. The Ark of the Covenant, everything like that. That is such a wildly large topic, and all I'm here today is to discuss, what's after today, what's after tomorrow. But I think personally that, yeah, Wojo, there you go, right there. The Seraphim, 6 wings, Isaiah 6:2. There's other ones that go into the size and how they have scales. Some have feathers. Some have gnarled claws. So it's who knows. Um, it said that Tesla created his coils by using instructions from the Bible on building the ark. I mean, Tesla is another absolutely phenomenal topic to rabbit hole with. His death ray, his assassination, political, social, and physical. Um, Tesla's an amazing topic. But as far as ghosts go, and as far as the topic of this show and what the afterlife might hold for all of us, I think that that's going to genuinely, and I believe this in my heart of hearts, no matter what you believe, no matter what doctrine of faith you go down, I think what lies on the other side is exactly what we expect. And I mean that for every individual. And so, whether you're Christian, Hindi, Buddhist, pagan, Wiccan, any number of faiths out there, I think our souls and our spirits are a force of creation. And I believe that they are driving our physical bodies to be a physical manifestation of that positivity and that creationism. And so, whether it's creating energy, whether it's creating physical things, whether it's creating a world that we actually want to live in, or conversely, one that we don't want to live in, or creating pain, or creating destruction, or creating harm, we are we are physical embodiments of that creative spirit and that creative nature. And I don't mean like God the creator, I mean just creative in general. We are spirits of production, and what we produce is going to internalize when it comes time for us to leave the physical and be alone with our energy and with our minds and with our wholeness and with our persons. And I think one of the major things for me, especially having been raised Catholic and studied Christianity more than I can really Denise, it's such an asshole. I love you. I love you. Yes, it was the actual metal. It was the adamantium that we fused to Wolverine's skeleton. That was the Ark of the Covenant. Um, so when our physical limitations are dropped and we just become ourselves and we become what energy we were meant to be and what energy we are, I think that's the moment where we hold ourselves to that standard, whether it's a divine judgment or a self judgment. I very much, I don't know if you guys have seen, what the hell was it called? Kim, if you're still watching, it's the Robin Williams movie. What Lies? No. Robin Williams movie. He goes to save his wife who committed suicide. Um, what Dreams May Come. That's the one. What Dreams May Come. And he gets to heaven, right? Yeah, he gets to heaven and he's looking for his wife who had committed suicide years before, and he finds out that she's stuck in hell. And he's talking to who he thinks is an angel that's there to help him, and it turns out no spoilers. But he finds out that sinners are in hell because they have put themselves there, because they can't forgive themselves, because they can't accept that they're good, because they broke the natural order of things. They broke the way that they were supposed to interact with the world while they were here. And that resonated with me a lot because we talk about, as Christians, we talk about the loving God, right? The forgiving God. Jesus died for our sins. He gave himself up for us. Then why would we still be going to hell unless we aren't capable of accepting that part of ourselves? And unless it's a self-imposed punishment. I don't, Stacy, I'm trying to have a serious moment. You and Denise just really screwing me up here. Yeah, I don't know. According to the hundreds upon hundreds of 28-year-old widows who threw themselves off the balcony of Victorian catwalks and widow walks that still walk those walks today in their flowing gowns, I'd imagine you get to pick. I'd imagine you get to pick because I can't imagine too many of them were getting that dolled up for just a regular Tuesday when they knew their husband wasn't coming home and there was not going to be a visitor. So I guess I guess you get to pick. That's the only thing I can think. You're killing me, guys. Stacy, but that's an argument why maybe you can't. Maybe that's why maybe there's like a set you get a set list. You're only allowed to wear things that you have worn. Muscle memory or spiritual energy that ties you to all the outfits you've worn. Which means I have some very interesting clothes to choose from when I pass. But guys, I want to thank you for joining me tonight. Thank you for going for this ride. Again, I do apologize for missing last week. I hope you found this a little bit informative or at least a little bit fun to just think about different stuff and think about the paranormal and the supernatural from just a little bit of a different angle. And again, I'm always interested in topics. If you guys have any topics, check me out over on Facebook or YouTube. Get moderated, drop me a line, or just post on the page there. Just things you'd want to discuss or things you might want to task me to research over the next couple of weeks. All right. Yeah, the new show day did throw a lot of people off, Damien. I do apologize. I made that shift about 3-4 weeks ago. Sundays just weren't working out for me anymore. But guys, I want to thank you so much for joining me again. And I hope you all stay blessed and keep that positive energy up. We're going to need it.